CC, guess what?
Yes.
I counted the number of shows. I just downloaded all these shows. We're now at 758.
We have an official number.
I think so. I think I forgot.
Oh, hold it.
It's around there.
You said you counted.
Yeah, but I forgot. But you know me.
Are you counting in pounds or dollars? What are we doing?
I forgot. I think it's 750, something like that.
Amazing.
Over 750.
And our guest tonight has been on how many times?
This is the third go around. I cannot believe he shows up.
I know. It's pretty cool.
People mention it to me. And somehow it's archived because people in other places around the state mention it.
They do?
Yeah.
You being on our show?
Yeah.
How bad it is?
No, they don't say that because they watched it. They actually watched it.
Well, you get a chance to watch. You get a chance to watch on YouTube. You know, you get a chance to check the show out, and you get to say what you want to say, and
It sticks around for a while.
it sits around for a while. It's something you can look back, and when you're done with politics, you can go back and look at all this crazy shit. And I was at the show at the skate shop.
Can we do an introduction, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, State Senator John Laird is in the house once again.
Welcome back, John.
All three people are fine.
I mean, when we started doing the show, we didn't think about a senator coming on the show,
No.
or a mayor,
Yeah.
or even the goddamn guy who picks up my trash. we had no idea what we were doing. But it's developed into it's developed into a show where people can say their piece and say what they're doing, say what's going on in our community.
And I feel like it's also we have an unobjective, unbiased approach.
Yeah.
To where we just kind of want to know what's going on in our community.
We've endorsed one person. Well, you're going to be our second. Who did we endorse? Gail Pellerin. We endorsed Gail. And she's like, oh, because of my politics? I go, no. Not because of what you politics, what you stand for, blah, 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 blah. Because I coached your daughter for 4 years soccer in high school, and she tortured me.
And
she was slow.
And
she
kicks ass.
She kicked ass.
Yeah,
She
great
was a
for
sweetheart.
our
So
community.
you know what, Gail? This is why we supported you.
Gail was an outstanding county clerk in elections.
She was
just outstanding, and I worked.
She was liked.
Oh yeah, and
isn't that what you in politics now? If you start off where you're liked.
Well, you hope so, but the thing is that she really every part of her job she did it. So when we went down to get married or get our license,
right?
It was 2008, and and we had to go down, and we thought it was just this pro forma thing. I think I was wearing some Hawaii T-shirt, and John was in.
Was your shirt tucked in or tucked out?
It was tucked out because I was just going to a counter.
There's a guy who knows how to wear a Hawaiian shirt.
I was just going
not tucked
to a counter to get out and she says, "Oh no, you're coming in my office. I'm doing it." And then she says, "And you have to take a picture." And I said, "I have to take a picture like this?" So we have this picture of us standing together when we got our license.
That's very
dressed
cool.
like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The other thing was she, when I worked for the county. They always needed people on election day, and I understood the election. So if there was ever a time I wasn't on the ballot, she had me down to troubleshoot with her, and she would say, "You're taking too long with them." And I remember one time, and it's a person, Susie Bright. She's a well-known author. She lives on the west side.
Yeah.
She was very upset at going into a church and having to vote below a religious thing. I had to take the thing and calm her down and deal with it. And Gail's like, "You're taking too long." And it's like, "No, I am calming this down. We are handling this here." So every time she retells the story, it goes another half hour. So she's now saying, "I think I spent 2 hours with her on the phone."
Can we talk about your day? Was that today?
Yeah, that was today.
Yeah.
So let's just back up because we jumped in tonight, and you were saying how this morning you were in Sacramento. And you had a bit of a scare at the Capitol? What
happened was, and I'd come in a half hour early. We were supposed to go into floor session, Senate and Assembly at 9 o'clock in the chambers in the Capitol. And I was in the office building a half hour early meeting with another senator. And I started getting these texts. And it said,
Duck.
Yeah, it said potential threat, potential active shooter, stay where you are. If your staff hasn't come in yet, call them and tell them not to come in. And then they locked down the building, and they wouldn't have let the session happen in the Capitol because they were really worried that the person was around the edge. They had an incredible police presence. And we have, in this office building that has all the legislators and the governor, we have all the committee rooms. And the biggest committee room, we actually met and had the Senate floor session in the committee room. And they cut out a lot of the agenda items. We just did consent and approved appointments. And then 3 of us were chairing hearings. 5 were actually chairing hearings, but 2 were in the Capitol. They canceled those. They said it was okay because we were in the lockdown space and everybody was already in. So I chaired a hearing for 3 hours after the session before driving down here. But they have arrested the person. It happened in the last hour or 2 before the show.
Is this something you guys have you trained for, or?
Our staffs are totally trained.
But you're not.
But we haven't really. They've done some stuff that's minimal with us, but it's like not to this level. And I think they found all this ammunition in a car parked near the Capitol. They knew who it was. It's somebody that was a threat, and they just thought, "Oh, this is it," and locked everybody down.
But in today's world, you're just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, how does?
I don't know. It's just strange because I have the situation where I've had a condo up there for 20 years, and it's near everything. I'm a block from the office, and I used to be 2 blocks from the Capitol when I was in the Assembly. I was 2 blocks from the Resources Building when I was secretary, and I never drive. I have never had my car in the office building because I'm about 100 steps away. And so this time I thought, oh man, I'm 100 steps out in the open. And yet there were highway patrol on each corner. They were, and I was wondering, why are you out in the open? But it worked, and they got the guy somehow.
Good.
It's weird. It almost seems normal to hear this kind of story. And
there was just a poll this week that said that 84% of Americans have somehow altered their life in some way, minor or big, due to the threat of gun violence.
I'm gonna say this. You and I go to hot yoga, right? And a friend of mine goes to hot yoga. He's higher up in the sheriff's department. So we're always come out of yoga and we're sitting on the ground suffering, going, that sucked. And my friend and I won't mention his name. We were talking one day, and he says, Neil, it was a shooting somewhere back east, and he says, Neil, in every high school in this town, there is a kid that has a gun. It's just
in class.
In class. That is just as a sheriff, I will tell you that. You can take it to the bank. Every high school in this town, this kid with a gun. That's just the way shit is nowadays. Like, you got to be kidding me. That's frightening.
Well, I don't want to sound like a bummer, but I just feel like it's kind of life. I got stuck on that East Cliff shooting yesterday in traffic down by the San Lorenzo River. Bring it on in, you guys. But anyways, my point being is, I feel like it's a little bit of life now, and I'm bummed that you and today were involved in that. Yesterday, Bay Federal Credit Union got held up. Yeah, I mean, it's like it's.
Well, no, there was also one of the. There these. I don't know if you call them mass shootings anymore. There were, I think, 6 people killed in Sacramento maybe 2 years ago, and it's right on a corner
on K Street.
Yeah, that's right there by the Capitol. And I think I was just walking the next week and wondered why all these flowers were right there.
Yeah.
And admittedly, it happened at 2 a.m. or something, but that still doesn't matter.
Do you and your colleagues, you must discuss what's happening. Do you feel there's potential for change? Do you hope?
Yes, I think yes, to the extent you have to ask yourself, like you do about any public policy thing, what can you actually do that will influence it? And I think there's certain things, we haven't, I mean, mental health is a piece of everything, but it's not all of it. And I think there's a certain amount of that. And I think all of us think, I read about some of these shooters in certain places, and they all were pushed out of something in some way. People shut them down, or or did something to them. And it's a message that, in a way that you can't create by law,
Right.
or you can't force people, is to just try to always reach out or inclusive with people, that or figure it out in one way, because I can't describe my spouse. We'll be watching TV, and in a lot of these places, people say, "Oh, that's never happened in our neighborhood. We never thought that would happen here."
Yeah.
And it's like,
It happened.
but like that person seemed like they were really in trouble. Nobody could figure that out until that moment,
Right,
and,
right.
and yet that's not necessarily law enforcement's job. And so you have to figure out, yes, wherever you can take guns out of the general population, it's a good thing. But I had a funny thing happen this morning. We got those first things, and I'm in the office with one legislator, and I walk across the lobby to my office, and there are two senators sitting, and they are two very conservative senators, and one of them says, "Oh, run toward the assembly, they have guns. You don't even have guns in the Senate." And her view was just, you need to have guns to shoot back. And it was sort of like, I was kind of surprised. And then my chief of staff was with me, and he just said something, and it triggered her. And I thought, oh man, Richard, you shouldn't have said that. Not that, it just that I knew that she thought differently. And there was a time when I was in the assembly that there was a retired police officer that I served with, very conservative, would just go off.
Wow.
And we all thought he probably had a concealed weapon permit.
Yeah.
And you have to be conscious of the fact that,
Yeah.
he could
Yeah.
spring at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Just.
But in any event,
No,
Yeah, well, it's I feel for you because, or I feel for America because this is not going to be easy. How we can hopefully reduce the number of gun deaths in America, and no one's going to agree on a solution. And
I was in
yes.
Iceland last year, and then I was at the climate conference in Egypt, and there's always people from other countries that say things like, I don't really want to go to America. I feel like I'd be unsafe. I feel like there's all this violence. And it is starting to be the rep in other parts
Yeah.
of the world.
Yeah. Sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I can see that.
Can I just jump in real quick, Neil?
Yeah, go ahead.
My wife loves Puerto Vallarta. We've been going there for years. The first time we went, I told her we were going to go. She goes, "I'm scared." I said, "Will you please do some research and get ready for this?" There was 5 times less crime than Santa Cruz in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting at that time.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how your perception of safety is really sort of.
Let me change the subject slightly, but perception of safety, because since we were talking earlier, since I was here last time, the whole Potro thing happened.
Yeah.
The atmospheric rivers.
Yeah.
And when I was on last time, I talked at length about what
You did.
we did last year about Watsonville Hospital.
Yeah.
And I mentioned the levees in passing, but it's an interesting thing because that project had been sort of in the works for a long time. And when I was in the assembly in 2006, I only represented 1.5 miles of the Potro at the time. But I thought, I'm going to do this. I did a bill that allowed a state share for a levee project there. And it would have been, I think, there's a big federal share, and then the state and local share, something like 70% state, 30% local.
Yeah.
So I do this, and I make sure in this bond that we're doing at the time, there's enough money in for it.
Yeah.
And then the project doesn't get built, and it doesn't get built, and they can't finalize it. And then finally, when Biden gets elected, there's infrastructure money, and it meshes with Jimmy Panetta. And so I do a bill in 2021 because they keep getting grants for that project that would take the state share over 70%, but they're capped at 70. So I did a bill that allowed the state to pay for 100% of the local share. And they couldn't have probably come up with it because there's not this property tax base, and as a result, it became fully funded, and the locals passed a tax on themselves last June, which is smaller, but to be able to maintain it and operate it and create a district.
Right.
Fully funded district, and we can't get there.
Yeah.
It's not going to break ground for about a year.
Wow.
And we couldn't get there. We did this, and there has been a lot of narrative about the fact, a lot of narrative about that it's a disadvantaged community and that people aren't like paying attention to it. And the irony about this is because they were a disadvantaged community, we got that money bought out.
Right.
And that hasn't happened anywhere else in the state. And so now we're going to have to figure out if there's any way we could accelerate it. I think there's a chance that we would have to waive some rules or some regulations. And so I'm working with the governor's office. We're seeing if that's possible. We're seeing it to federal. But the other thing is, since I'm on a show here, is when
you want a really good, give me a great show. We have a great show.
I did 4 minutes live on the national NPR morning news.
Oh my goodness!
About 3 or 4 days after that,
yeah.
And I learned an interesting thing.
Which is
this?
what?
You can't Google this. And the interesting thing is they do not trust you if you're on the West Coast and you have to get up at 5 a.m. to be live. So I got a wake-up call from NPR at 4:15. They just did not trust that I would get up on my own and somehow there'd just be this dead air. You know, and I've heard from people all across the country because I had briefly told the story about we just couldn't get there. But I described the fact that the levee broke in the middle of the night, sirens went off, people just with the clothes on their back and what they grabbed left. And I think I have heard from people that was really meaningful to them, is to describing the situation of what happened.
Can we bounce around here a little bit?
Wherever you want.
So here comes Biden, right, with helicopters and all this shit, and here comes President's coming to Capitola to look at 3 restaurants that are no longer in business. Their insurance money's coming. The insurance money's coming to the owners. They're fine, but there's a tree through a window of a restaurant. That was about it.
They were closed and they were damaged.
But is this bigger problems in Santa Cruz and these 3 restaurants in Capitola, Mr. President? Down here,
you know, and he went in a partial defense. He also went to the seawall being out and the pier being down there. But I'm in agreement with you because my view was, come on, just a mile away was a mobile home park that was mudded out in SoCal, and there was also a neighborhood underwater in Watsonville. It would have been good.
And we have a huge homeless problem here in this town. Admittedly, as we talked about, it's a now countrywide problem, but it's.
But I also can tell you a story because
I love you.
Because I was one of 15 people or so that greeted him at the airport in Watsonville.
You were?
Yeah, I didn't go to the Capitola thing, but I was there, and he was really personable. He spent a minute or 2 with each of us, and then took a picture at the end, and I could hear him talking to the others. And the person behind me was somebody that had completely been flooded out of her house. And she described to me how first kid in the family to go to college came home and he lost his car, it was flooded, and they were staying with friends, and we tried to hook her up with a way to get housing vouchers, and he was really good with her. But when I got there to him for my minute or 2,
come closer because
I said, Mr. President, thank you for coming here. It's like we were slammed. We've been hit harder than almost anywhere in the state. We need your help, and we're really glad you're here and paying attention. And I said, you might not know that California is the only place where a state legislative district is larger than a congressional district. There are 1 million people almost in the state Senate district, and you know it's larger than a congressional district, about 250,000. And he pauses and he goes, "That's the size of Delaware." You know, so I thought he's listening.
Yeah,
he's paying attention.
Yeah, it was a good visit. It was a good visit. You want to get you some water?
Bill's going to figure it out.
Bill's going to figure it out.
But the thing is that, I think he has followed through with the presidential declaration.
Right.
Some other things that we needed.
Yeah. You just got back from Denmark, correct?
Yes. Just Saturday night.
So I have a spy that gives me information on you and other politicians in this town. It'd be Laura Lee Martin.
Laura, she'll pay.
She's my dear friend. She goes, he just got back. I go, Laura, what's the guy been doing? She goes, just got back from Denmark. And
it was a delegation on climate.
On climate and about wind machines.
Yeah, went out to the wind turbines that are off the coast of Denmark to see them and saw what the port was and met with the companies. So they you know, about what they have to do.
Right.
And the big thing is transmission.
That's vodka, by the way.
Better not be.
I'm just kidding. We know you, John.
Yeah, I have to drive back.
We know you, John. That's okay. We know you.
Yeah. So the thing is that
but
there's all these. You know, one of the two places it's going to happen in California
is
off of San Luis Obispo County.
Morro Bay.
Yeah, off of the district. And when the Diablo Canyon thing was negotiated, it was only extended for 5 years, so the wind can come on and use that same transmission. You don't have to build new transmission, but they don't have transmission for the Humboldt one.
Right.
And so we were looking at how they did the transmission. It requires a lot of port space. How did they do the port space? And there's this whole thing. Those were not in the deep water that will happen off California. I saw the ones off Scotland.
They're 400 miles.
Those float.
Yeah.
You know, and I've now realized those work. I was always like, I don't get the floating thing. And they have underwater platforms that the pressure of the water stabilizes it. And then you have to have cords to the floor, although to the ocean floor. And the interesting thing is they had there, I took a picture, we went around it, they have a power substation that is also there above the water that collects from all the individual turbines and then puts it in one cable into land.
So these turbines are huge, correct? They're
a
longer.
lot of them are like,
They're longer than the Eiffel Tower.
they're not that long.
Sure.
Well, maybe with what sets them up
Right.
in the pole, but I want to say it's 60 yards and 60 yards, the actual turbines together, and they had three. They had it in threes there. And
Do they affect the ocean life in any way?
yes, there's a lot of research done
Right.
on it, and there's a lot of research being done on San Luis Obispo right now. For example, there's some marine scientists in the Monterey Bay that are doing whales and seals.
Right.
I think they're doing the aquatic big ones, and the fact that it's out there, it's 20 miles or so, it's into federal water.
Right. Yeah.
But the fact that it's out there, yes, there's definite marine mammal and aviary impacts, but it's not the same. You know, on the ground, the LA Department of Water and Power has them in the mountains in Southern California. And when I was Resources Secretary, I actually had to call the mayor's office once and said, "You just did your 6th Golden Eagle strike. You're on probation." You know, because you can't be taking these endangered species and just figure it out.
Right.
You have to figure it out.
Right.
So, and I can't even tell you down in the weeds about what you do to fight that, but they have to, and there's certain things they can do. You know, but in any event, there are all these other things. They burn plastics and turn it into energy. They have lots of water recycling. They breed cows to produce less methane. That's experimental, and that was a weird moment because they cut a hole in the cow and have a tube that goes in about
Get the hell out of here.
about 2 feet, and so there were a couple of senators that they put
Yeah.
complete gloves on. I thought, you're the ones for this
Pass.
one. I'm not doing this one.
Ladies and gentlemen, you never know what you're going to hear on this show. You never know what you're going to get.
And believe me, this is a tube they cut. It's not another orifice of the cow. It is one that's on the back that they actually cut. And it's funny, the first senator that did it is very short, and she was sort of on a ladder, having trouble reaching into the cow. We then got a tall senator to be the second one.
Is there photos to prove that?
There are, but you're getting them somewhere else. I'm not
You
giving
keep a
those to
straight
you.
face when you watch that?
Oh, I was
Is that-
laughing hysterically of when I could pay attention to it. There was a moment when I was like, "This is just too much."
No.
Are we guaranteed to have? Is there a future of wind powered off our coast?
Yes.
It's
The
coming?
federal government has now done 5 leases, and they've done them off of Morro Bay and Humboldt. And the expectation is, if everything went right, let's see, we're in 2023, it would be 2029. But there's a lot that has to go right. There's the research on marine life to make sure it's okay. There's the construction, but it requires port space. you have to have what's known as laydown space for the assembly of the.
Well, you got to construct them. You have to be able to.
Don't they have these on the East Coast right now?
Yeah, they've done leases and they're getting up. But
and are there whales washing up on the beach and dolphin washing up on the beach?
No, but they're completely different. They're in more shallow water, and they'll be able to affix to the ocean floor.
Okay.
Not in California, off the coast 20 miles, because it's a deeper.
So we're talking how far off our coast?
Off the top of my head,
like
I think
400
it's
miles.
20. No, it's not that far.
No?
It's not that far.
20's great, because I'm a fisherman. And
Well, no, and that's
20's where the
another
tuna
issue.
start to
And
hang
I
out.
just got, it's funny, I was in Denmark, and I get a memo from the Morro Bay fishermen with 23 concerns, and I get it the night before we're going to this thing. So I said, okay, I have this. Can you speak to some of these issues? And they have marine science, some of it's posted, it's happening here, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It was just issued in the last few days. The Monterey Bay Aquarium did sort of guidelines for what they think should be taken into account with regard to marine life and dealing with wind. And so, and this is one of those things that there's so many pieces to it. You can't expect necessarily that the company that gets the lease will be the one that makes some of the port decisions and some of the other things. And so this is where the governor and the federal government have to really do it. But the governor's person was just appointed to the Public Utilities Commission, and I'm waiting to see that they have somebody else, because they're really going to have to coordinate all this. Yeah. And for a long time, there was so much uncertainty about it. People weren't very supportive about doing this. But we need so much renewable electricity to meet our goals if we're really going to get off of gas. And really, we're already in California mostly off of coal. And if we're going to also phase out the one nuclear plant, we have to have a lot of electricity, particularly if we're moving. I'm pointing to a moving truck right now. If we're going to have electricity-powered vehicles, or an overwhelming majority of vehicles compared to petroleum.
How many homes would that? Like one of those turbines?
They actually had a statistic in Denmark. It was like homes for 300,000 were from one or two of the big turbines for a year. But they just said that anecdotally. I did not check that out.
Okay, so we're gonna go off. We're gonna go off to different section number. Which is section number 3? TC?
Check number 4.
Okay, my son has a Tesla, right? My son's got a Tesla. He loves it. I say, hey, Quinn, how's the car running? He goes, I don't know, Dad. It's got 2 moving parts. Runs fine. Because it's great. Mm-hmm. What happens to the batteries are in that car? He's going to trade it in here shortly, get another one. But what's going to happen? There's battery storage going on, correct? Are you involved in that?
Yeah, you mean battery storage for power?
For anything.
Well, I think you're involved in making sure that we have a plan in case we have a problem.
Yes,
you're working on
a
new bill, right?
Right now, and I'll talk about that, but I'll get to that. Because either way, the real issue that we haven't fully contemplated yet is that even to solar panels on roof, they have a life.
Right.
So what do you do
at the end
when you're like 30 years of that? What do you do? Batteries, and it was very interesting because when we were at the Wind in Denmark, they said these have a life of 25 to 30 years. And I said, can you just rehab them? And they said, no, we would probably have to take them down and put new ones up. And it was sort of like, you're kidding. I sort of thought you could maintain them and do things and there would be a longer life. And so as we move into this and we have such a tremendous goal, we're going to have to deal with that. And there's some people. I was hearing them talk about the recycling for the solar panels and how they can pull those apart. The batteries is another thing, and it's batteries just in any of a number of ways.
Right.
It's battery storage on the industrial level. It's batteries in Teslas, or and I don't think I even thought. I drove.
He just bought a hybrid.
No, I drove my.
I love it.
Yeah,
I have a battery-powered car now. It's awesome.
Yeah,
and it's so quiet. I whisper to my wife now when I drive.
What do you whisper to? What do you whisper to?
How hot she is and stuff. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah,
but we literally drive around.
Go ahead a second.
This is being taped.
That didn't happen when you had a gas gasoline car?
No, you couldn't hear me because I drove a diesel.
So
pickup truck.
her view of you is like gone up tremendously.
Well, I
It's
went
helped
from
you.
I went
Hang on a
from a
second.
diesel
So-
pickup truck
so
to an electric car.
your new Jeep truck has helped your sex life.
Absolutely. If everybody gets an electric car,
So everybody,
you can hear that.
We're doing public
Everybody-
policy, but we never take this into
everybody
account.
gets
Yeah,
a
you
hybrid.
might want to.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a hybrid car. Their libido goes up.
Well, I also in regards to batteries, they are recycling batteries now, Neil.
I don't
That
know.
industry is
No,
becoming
they are and
way more advanced.
They are, and it's interesting because my previous car, which I had for 10 years, was a Toyota Camry hybrid, and I drove it 250,000 miles, and I was about, I can't remember, 175,000 miles, and I had to switch out the battery.
Yeah.
You know, and they were going to recycle it. I didn't ask them how.
Yeah.
I just knew they were doing recycling.
And that technology's gotten better. Like the naysayers of the battery thing, like that we're moving at light speed. We're years into this
Well,
technology.
and let me just talk briefly about what you brought up too, because there was an incident last fall. It might have been before we taped our last show, but in Moss Landing, and
Fire.
Yeah. it's a
yeah,
fire.
and it was a small one, but they put water on it, and they asked everybody to shelter in place for a while, and they used the term vapor cloud, and they closed Highway 1 for most of the day, and there still hasn't been a clear explanation about what totally happened, and yet on the other side, we had those 10 days last September that the grid was on the verge of going down. And there were certain hours during that heat crisis that there was more energy from battery storage into the grid than the base load from Diablo Canyon in those hours.
Right.
And so battery storage arguably got us through that without the grid going down. And since then, it's increased by a bunch. It is increasing exponentially every year. And so there are some people in Morro Bay that have big concerns about that one being sited in the old fossil fuel plant when because of what they think happened in Moss Landing. And I want to take the issue of safety off the table. I want there to be safety plans, evacuation plans, that people work with the local fire departments, the local fire departments know what to expect. The Moss Landing Port Commissioners visited and said they were really worried that they didn't know if there'd been runoff into the Elkhorn Slough,
Right.
and they're worried about the health of the Elkhorn Slough. I want that issue to be dealt with. I got it out of the first committee this week.
I feel like you're at the forefront of that. Everybody wants to know that their backyard's safe and that there's a plan if there's a problem. We're destined to move into a battery life. You look at the bikes in Santa Cruz now; they're all electric power. No one's buying a bike that has pedals only. You're electric now. They all are.
My spouse has one.
It's the future. We know it. We already know that. Cars, we know it. How are we going to make sure that everyone feels safe with this technology? I like what you're trying to pass. Just knowing that the people who are going to be in charge will have a plan if there is a problem.
And apropos of Neil bringing up Denmark, they have this phenomenal bicycle culture.
Right. Right.
And I went 2 days early because, as Bill knows, and generally is bored with it, I am a family history junkie. And my mom's grandmother, when she was 4, her whole family immigrated from this little small village in southern Denmark. So I went 2 days early and went to it.
That's cool.
And it's funny, when you're on a delegation like that, they take care of you. They book the hotel, they have a bus meeting, they have people that meet you and take you on the ship. When I went for the first 2 days, I was on my own.
Yeah.
I went and got this rental car with my luggage from the airport, and I drove 2 hours down to this other part and had to master whatever the vagaries were. I read the rules about Danish driving beforehand. They really fine you. If you don't signal when you change lanes, if you tailgate.
Right.
On the bike?
No, that. But when I came back, I had to drop this car in the center of Copenhagen, and everybody is riding their bicycle everywhere around you, and I had to be really conscious of that as I was driving.
Yeah.
And yet, we had these events with officials, and so somebody from the consulate there rode their bike to the thing.
Yeah.
This one guy that was CEO of some green energy company rode his bike, and and it's funny because it was in the 40s. I think we were really excited when it cracked 50 once, and they were wearing overcoats and mufflers and helmets and riding their bike. I mean, they were just committed to it.
I have an e-bike. I mean, I park my car down here, and if I'm going to go downtown, I ride my bike. I get there I get there at the same time. I don't have a parking problem, and and I'm getting exercise at the same time.
You know what I saw yesterday? A 3-seater e-bike.
You
Really?
did?
Yes. Is that not the future, though? If you
Yeah.
think about, like, I envision Greenway. Imagine a 3-seater bike. It's the same engine, the same 750-watt motor in the back hub, but it's got room for 2 kids on the back. It's, to me, it's sort of the future, right? And it is the future, no matter what. Whether any of us agree or anybody
No, and I
watching
think
this.
the big challenge is you see, I was here right after somehow not long after we finished the last session, and we had such major progress on climate in last legislative session, but now we have to do it. And this year, when the Diablo thing happened, we did not in a lot of the climate package have renewable energy jammed in it. So I got $1 billion of new renewable energy jammed in the Diablo deal since it wasn't in the other. And we spread it over 3 years. I think 500 million last year. This year was 100 million or 2, and the rest is next year. And we held the governor's feet to the fire. So even though there's a deficit this year, he is not backing off $1 of what he committed in that deal. It is in the budget. So we're going to keep going ahead.
Bill, can I ask you a question? Come here a second. Come on. Get up here.
He does that.
He does that. It's a simple question, because you know this gentleman very, very well, right? Does anybody get more shit done than he does in Sacramento?
Absolutely not.
Right? I mean, bills, how many?
It's been 29 in 2 years plus a lot of budget.
29 2 years plus a lot of budget.
And I got 24 bills moving right now, although I have a couple that are.
I just know he got 82 done when he was in
Yeah, in
assembly.
assembly, 6 years.
Well, in a nutshell, what's your advantage? What makes it?
I think it's a bunch of different things because it's the legislative process. It's being committed on issues and committed to get things done, and it's also relationships. Each year, the last 2 years, I did a really hard bill that wasn't really high profile. 2 years ago, California was one of 5 states that if you had an action against somebody for pain and suffering due to their negligence, asbestos came up during COVID.
Yeah.
That died with you. Your family didn't get that right. Yeah, they still had a civil right to sue.
Yeah.
And so I did a bill, and it was really hard, and I got it done. We are no longer one of those 5 states. And in the assembly, I came to a compromise that, in my view, didn't water it down, but it was the relationships with a couple of the business. And last year, there was a mobile home rent control carve-out. It passed in 1992 that said that from that point forward, any new mobile home park, any new mobile home space could not be subject to rent control. So in Santa Cruz, if Deanza Mobile Home Park added spaces, everybody could be subject to rent control before, but not there. So I did a bill and struck a compromise that 15 years to recover costs, and then everything comes under rent control. And immediately, any new ones that were built between 1992 and 2007, once again, it was a relationship where at a key night before a hearing, I negotiated with this guy, and we came to an agreement, and we got there. And so
The relationships.
Well, I talked last time about the Watsonville Hospital bill, doing that in 19 days.
Yeah.
That was really sort of knowing the levers and knowing people.
Is that your proudest bill that you did?
Thus far, this one, yeah.
Watsonville Hospital.
Yeah, I think it's the whole effort I'm really proud. I mean, last year was unbelievable. I was instrumental in choosing the state auditor. I think I was instrumental in getting all the concessions for the Diablo deal. We had a climate package, and I did that. We had the biggest year-over-year increase to K through 12 funding, and I was chair of the thing. And I had 20 bills on the governor's desk. But that was the greatest source of satisfaction. And I think part of it was we were never sure the whole time we were going to be able to do
Right.
it. We were even a month or two short, and we were about 15 million short. And it's like, holy crap, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And I say we because people in the Pajaro Valley really stepped up.
Yeah.
I mean, really stepped up at the end. And the great thing was we got it so close
Which
that
people?
they knew.
Which people in Pajaro Valley? It wasn't the farm brokers, but which people in Pajaro Valley stepped up?
Oh,
Can you be more
Driscoll
specific?
stepped up. They gave,
Oh,
I think,
it's
1.5 million as long as it was a match. The
They're right there in the plane. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
the
right there.
Larger
community foundation. There's still a $5 million anonymous donation. I don't know who it was.
Right. Wow.
You know, and so
Neil,
Yeah.
thank you, Neil.
yeah,
I know.
I got 5.
yeah.
You know, it's funny because John, I remember a few years back, you were getting ready to toss your hat. You're like, I'm going back in, and we're like, why the hell do you want to do this?
It's exactly this.
Well, I
It-
get it.
People say, "How do you stand?" You know, because you might have even asked the first time. It's like, what did you forget about? And I said, I forgot about the student council part, where somebody looks at somebody the wrong way. Ah! You know, and yet I get motivated by getting things done. It really is a motivation.
Winning.
Which bill are you worked that you've had total failure on that you know you're going to make it happen one of these days in the future?
Well, I
I'm just
have
gonna-
this
like
failure.
one-
I
one
don't
you
know
want-
total.
one you want-
I don't want to
Your
think I want to
teeth are stuck
subscribe to
your
the
teeth
total
are stuck
part.
your teeth are stuck into
Yeah.
it.
No, there was this very interesting bill that I tell stories about from when I was in the assembly, and it was like, I used to, and I hate to say this out loud, I used to meet with anybody that asked to meet. And so I'd go in the district office.
I thought we
and
were
I'd
special.
have these-
Hang on a second. I thought we were special.
Yeah.
Well, we're anybody.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And so this guy asked to meet, and I go in and I sit down, and he walks in, and he puts on the table 2 cans. And I, well, that's what I'm going to tell you. And it was sort of like, I'm thinking, what could this be? And he said, you might not know this, but between 10 and 15,000 kids in California develop an allergy to food. Their body just rejects all food. Right. And they have 2 options. They can have a state insurance will pay for it, or you can drink these cans, and it doesn't taste very well, but their body doesn't reject it. But that costs $11,000 a year, and nothing pays for it. Wow. And so I was persuaded, and I did this bill. And it got caught up in all this other stuff. They were saying, oh, there's no money. All these liberals are trying to get things done through health insurance because there's no money. And I was like, it's going to cost $100,000 a year or something. It's going to save these kids. And there was one hearing. I was in the Senate. I was in the Assembly at the time, but I was in a Senate hearing. And all these senators are grousing, and I had 2 11-year-olds testify.
You did?
And by the time it was done, that bill moved out. They were all, but they voted for it. Yeah. And I couldn't get it all the way. Oh. I couldn't get that bill all the way. And in the end, there was a way that was found to do some of it. And so sometimes when you have a failure, it forces the issue. I was really disappointed. I really wanted to deliver that one. Yeah. You know,
may it come back? Will it come back?
Well, we'll see. You're making me want to go find out where it exactly stands right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting
So
situation.
I want to finish up the show, TC.
Yes, sir.
With the subject of cannabis. Do you have 2 bills going on right now? 3 with cannabis?
Yeah, one is that.
Before we start, have you ever smoked cannabis in your life?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's been a long time.
All right. Well, because you know.
Well, no, I got before you got here. Before you got here, we talked about it because I was asked once 20 years ago, and it was illegal. And I think the answer was Al Gore got in trouble because he said he inhaled and exhaled, and Bill Clinton said he inhaled and didn't exhale. And about Jerry Brown, they said he inhaled and never exhaled. and so I'm in the Al Gore category. That was the way I answered the question. We talked about that.
We did. I know. TC, can I show you? Have you ever smoked pot in your life?
All of it.
I think it was before the car was so quiet.
Yeah.
And so the thing is one of the bills, what we're trying to do is there's this whole new regulatory system for legal cannabis, and yet there's still incentive for people to be outlaws and not come in the system. And we were hoping that people would come in the system, because when I was resources secretary, geez, there were these places, northeast Mendocino County, where they would use pesticides that had been illegal for years. They would divert massive amounts of water illegally.
Mm-hmm.
They had guns, and they would do stuff that people
Trash.
They were his friends. In other words,
Those aren't my friends.
No, but
My
the
friends
point
are
is-
responsible.
The point is that it made much more sense to have a regulated system
Right.
and to try to deal with that. And so then it's incumbent to make the regulated system work. And there's certain places where people think, oh, 5 different grows, I'll get busted on one, I'll still be ahead, as opposed to being legal.
Yeah.
And so one of the bills is right now, there's a law, California Environmental Quality Act, known as CEQA. We have to do a complete environmental review. And if you're a licensee, you have to do it at the local level. And then you have to do the same process again at the state level. So I have a bill that says you just should do it once. You should go from 2 to 1 so that it's not a big obstacle, and the administration supports it. There's another thing about health warnings. There's a labeling requirement,
Right.
but I have a bill that would create information that would be available and distributed to people at sites. And then the third thing is on some of those grows, right now, you can get a warrant and the sheriff can go in and people can go in to deal with it. But if you're the water board, you're supposed to announce 24 hours in advance that you're going in, which gives everybody a chance to duck it. And so I have a bill that allows them to do the same thing with the sheriff and go in together and be able to inspect for water. So it's funny because Bob Wajkowski, who got term limited out, who I really love, he was from Fremont. We just overlapped 2 years. And he said, oh, Santa Cruz. Wouldn't be a Santa Cruz representative unless you had at least one cannabis bill.
which is probably true.
Yeah, and I didn't expect, when I decided to do the third one, my staff said, you already got 2. You really want to do 3 cannabis bills, but each one makes sense on its own.
It's never going away. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's never going away. The cannabis industry is here to stay.
Yeah.
How we control, whether it's government
Exactly.
or whether it's communities, how we control and regulate and enable it to live on successfully is a big problem. Black market should not be larger than what is considered legal. And I think that's the biggest problem with it.
I think that's right.
Are you running again?
Yeah, I announced a month ago.
You
And-
did?
And you know, the primary is 11 months away. I mean, everybody's sick of the last one, and they can't believe the next one is
The election.
coming. Yeah, so I announced to get out there and let people know, and I'm sure there'll be some others that run, but the district changes, and that's the interesting thing. If the assembly districts, Gail Pellerin, 2 years, and so they got these new districts, they ran, they're done, they're representing the new ones. Congress, it changed, Jimmy Panetta, his district changed a lot, he ran, he won. In the Senate, I was elected from a district to go through December 2024, and the new district will lose 300,000 people and gain 300,000 different people, and I'll have about 700,000 people that hold over, so I will lose anything in Santa Clara County. I will gain all of San Benito, which is Hollister, San Juan, Pinnacles, and I will gain all of Monterey County. I don't have Salinas in the Salinas Valley, and I'll lose the southern 18% of the voters in San Luis Obispo because that was the population equalizer.
Right.
I'll lose Napomo and Pismo Beach, and I'm really sorry about that because even though somebody said, that's really conservative, I said, I don't care. I have had a great time representing everybody in San Luis.
And there's a lot of important things going in that area too.
Oh, Well,
representative.
you've got Cal Poly, the prison is affected, the Oceana Dunes.
Yeah, the dunes are
Canyon,
huge,
Diablo
right?
Canyon,
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. there
So
really is.
who absorbs that?
Monique Limon from Santa Barbara will get that little part at the south.
Was she pissed?
Not really.
No?
For a while, she was excited that she might be able to go all the way up to San Luis Obispo, and I said, "Don't get too excited. 'Cause I don't want that to happen." Although we had no control over it. You know, it's an independent commission.
Before I know we're getting ready to end the show, but I just wanted to. I see a lot of people who are not educated or knowledgeable of what's going on with housing and what the state is demanding and what happens because of that. We have an 8-story project in downtown Santa Cruz that's been at the front lines of the editorials and the community input of papers in any website.
I drove by. It's construction on the way here.
Yeah, it's big. But just so people know, because I feel like some people don't know that the city's being everyone is being pushed to create more housing.
Yeah,
right now.
there's a process, and the state the state says you have to plan for additional housing, and it's always never had any teeth. And Governor Newsom is trying to give it teeth, and I'm ambivalent in some ways about it because we need the housing, but we have 480 cities and 58 counties, and everything is different. San Francisco has this endless hetchy water. They just get water from the Sierra. They're good, and Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz County does not import water in any way. Mm-hmm. At this point, Monterey County does not import water. They have to live on what the groundwater is or however much it rains. And just before the atmospheric rivers, when we thought the drought might continue, the two reservoirs in southern Monterey County were down to something like 10% to 20%.
Nacimiento and San Antonio?
Exactly.
Yeah, my brother has a house there.
Yeah.
Low tide.
And Loch Lomond was down at 70% or something. And Loch Lomond, if you really, really stretch, is about 3 years capacity, 2 for sure.
I feel like it's kind of a kiddie pool of reservoirs anyways.
Well,
it's not gigantic.
We could do a whole show on water, but the thing about it is that Santa Cruz used to, when I was on the city council, had 9 different water sources. I mean, there's the wells by the tannery. There's a system that Bill loves to death in Live Oak, the Bell's Wells. There's streams that are up the north coast, Laguna Lidell, Majors. And there's the inflatable dam at Felton. So if there's enough water flow, you can back pump up to Loch Lomond. And it used to be, when I was on the city council, that some of them are more expensive than others, and you would try to draw in the least expensive until you ran out of water. Now you sort of need it all. And Loch Lomond, the streams used to flow till May, which will happen this year, which will be a rare year. Mm-hmm. But in climate change, they're stopping in February. And so Loch Lomond was supposed to be a backup, and now it's become a central source of supply. So when you're looking at housing, and one of my colleagues, who's one of the chief housing advocates, said once when I was there at an event, he said, people say infrastructure is a problem. You build the housing, infrastructure will follow. And I took him aside and said, spoken like somebody that has hetchy water in his district. It's like, we don't have that. And people are built up against the ocean. And it's not like there's a lot of room in some places to go. And so it's the problem you had with state laws is you have a law that applies to everybody, regardless of the individual circumstances by county or by city. So I'm a little concerned that the ask is greater than places like Santa Cruz can provide in the infrastructure. Right. Meanwhile, you try to do things. So, I mean, we got $3.5 billion into the budget over 2 years to build higher education housing. Cabrillo, for the first time, should. More UCSC and at Cal State Monterey Bay, and hopefully that lessens a little of the impact on surrounding communities. I did the mobile home thing, so hopefully that's more affordable to people. Yeah. And we keep trying to do things, but it's hard. Yeah. It's intractable. There's some estimates that say we couldn't even begin to affect housing prices unless we had 3 million more units in California, and we've been building, I think the most units we built in a year in the last few decades is 200 or 250,000. So it's not, when I was in the assembly, we did a housing bond, affordable housing bond, and it led to the construction of 50,000 units. That was a big thing, but that's a drop in the bucket when you look at what's needed statewide. Yeah.
It's really, we live in a really cool state. I get why people want to be here. But I also today in the paper read that we actually lost people in California to, we're going out almost the opposite way currently with population a little bit. But we're under still these mandates from Newsom and whoever to build more housing. And I don't know is there a time that you think there'll be a leveling?
We're still off from it.
Demand is still outweighing.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic really affected a little bit of the exodus too, because when the remote working has really changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know somebody that's been working from another state, and you know, they occasionally require them to come in, but it's not the way it used to be 8 to 5. You just be there.
It's coming back, you think? I have a friend who works in Catalina.
No, and I think
guy.
I think the place that's going to take the hit is thus far in urban areas in the country, the one that still hasn't come back the most is San Francisco.
Yeah.
And downtown businesses are going under, the real estate market. I bet you a lot of people finance these office buildings thinking they'd be close to full, and that's going to go belly up at some point.
You drive. I was up there the other day, building game, riding my bike around there. It was empty, ghost town.
Well, I feel that way on Pacific Avenue right now here in Santa Cruz.
Well,
It's the most vacant buildings I've ever seen, hands down, today.
yeah, the city's trying hard though to make that make that change. So
No, they're working on it.
Yeah,
And it is a work in progress.
Well, we've scarcely scraped the surface here.
I know.
So there's just a lot
There is.
going
but
on.
go ahead, TC.
Well, I was just going to say, I will go back again to what we said to you. Why are you so fired up to throw your hat back in?
I got the answer. I have the answer for you.
Uh-oh.
Relationships. He has a lot of relationships with all these people that he knows that can make things happen. If you had the relationships that didn't make things happen, be like, fuck it.
No, it's interesting because
I
that
mean,
meeting
right?
I was having before the session was with a brand new legislator.
people you have
And she
relationships
sort of
with,
said, will I ever get there? And I said, yes, but you have to plug at it. You have to plug away at
The
it.
people you have relationships with want to make things happen.
No, I
And
feel
you-
one of the interesting things is having been around Sacramento, never left Santa Cruz, still live here, but been around Sacramento since I got elected to the Assembly over 20 years ago, between the cabinet and the state board and the Assembly and now the Senate. I have former staffers all over the place.
Right.
Like my former general counsel at Resources is the head of the Air Board, which is doing all the climate work. My former assistant secretary for water is the head of the water board and doing all the water stuff. I helped hire some of the department heads that are still there, Water and Fish and Wildlife and the Conservation Corps. The former Parks director that we hired is now the deputy director of emergency services and was really helping me a lot on Pajaro when that was happening.
Yeah.
And so there's people all around that you can call at key times to really try to make things
You
happen.
got a big toolbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Piece of information. What tidbit did you give Gail Pellerin when she went in her
Oh,
arrival?
let me tell you a
Sacramento?
funny story. I think she was running about a month, and it was my birthday at the end of March. And she called and she says, we're going to have a birthday dinner. And my spouse says, you're running. You're working around the clock. She said, there will always be time for family and friends. And they hang up, and he turns to me and says, she doesn't know. She doesn't know. It was really good. You know.
That's very cool. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
And I know I'll
Appreciate
be
it.
back again.
I
The
hope
world
so.
will change. by the
Before
time
we
that
leave, I know you have some sort of way people can get to you and know what's going on through
always
websites, social
there's a
media.
website, a Senate website, and if you just Google my name, it will pop up, and you can get there, and it tells all the ways to contact, because there's electronic ways or mailing ways, or I have offices in San Luis Obispo City, Monterey City, Santa Cruz City, and there's even a phone number in Morgan Hill and other places that in the old days wouldn't be a toll call, but rings into the office. So there's lots of ways
get
that
hold of
you
you.
can
So
get
people
in
who
touch.
want to support you and
There's a whole campaign thing too.
Okay, we got that.
You just do John Laird for Senate, that'll pop up.
right.
And there's a Facebook one too.
Okay.
Well, I want to say thank you personally.
Yeah.
Because if people like you who care can make a difference, because there's so many people who just walk in the tracks every day and don't care. And I just thank you for caring about our community and our state and our country, because we need more John Lairds in this world, honestly.
Oh, my spouse will have a lot to say.
Well, I honestly,
No, there was this great mailer, the League of Conservation Voters to the huge mailer in the district saying, call him and thank him for his climate work. And it comes to the House and he says, I have to call him? I'm not going to call him. You know, it was good.
Well, we're going to have you back. We'll
Good.
get an
Thank
update
you.
on the future election.
Bill
Yeah.
has me in the calendar.
Yeah.
Bill has me in the calendar. A year from now, get him back.
We'll get you back in here. Neil, any last words?
A lot of shows coming up.
We got some big shows,
Oh,
right?
Jimmy Pinet's coming back.
Jimmy Pinez coming
Maybe
back?
he'll come back with his mom.
His mom?
I doubt that.
Oh.
No.
I'm scared of her.
I doubt that.
She's scared.
Please let me know when that's
Yeah. That will not happen, I don't think.
Next week?
got
some live
Austin
music.
Smith Ford next week.
Oh, okay, that's awesome.
And I got
Okay.
the show tomorrow night at Pono. This Sunday, my summer long series starts at Seascape Resort, not hotel.
Nice
Seascape
weather
Resort.
Sunday.
Nice weather.
Kind of a sunset vibe down there.
It's gonna be a 2 to 4. It's gonna be a fun event every Sunday for the next God knows how long.
And if anyone sees Neil, buy him a drink.
Thank you.
Yep, I got you. I got your back. So
That's it. Good
Thanks
night.
everybody for tuning
Goodbye.
in.
Good
T-Fox,
night.
Santa Cruz Waves. Good night, everybody.